Hey guys, welcome to channel DevKage. In this video, we will see how shared preferences can be used to store simple data persistently. So if you have been developing apps for some time, you would have come across situations where you have to store some basic data persistently so that it can be accessed when user opens the app next time. Data like some integers, doubles, booleans or even strings maybe. For such a small data, it does not make sense to set up a database, right? So to solve this simple problem, Flutter team provides a simple and easy to use package called Shared Preferences. This package is available on Flutter's pub.dev site. I'll put the link in the description. If you want, you can read through this page. I'm going to skip this for now because I have already done that. So to use this package, go to the installing tab. Here it says that add this to your package's pubspec.yaml file. So let's copy this line and go to our Flutter app. Let's open the pubspec YAML and paste this line under dependencies. Make sure that you have two spaces before this line, otherwise it will not work. Now if I hit Ctrl S to save this file, the Flutter plugin will kick in and run the flutter pub-get command. So while this is running, let me quickly tell you what this app will do. We will basically have two buttons which will store and display the number of times each button was pressed. And this data will be stored using shared preferences so that it persists across multiple sessions. Looks like pub-get has completed. We can now close this file and the shared preferences package should be available for use in our app. So let's get started. I'll first remove this text widget and add a column widget here. Inside this column, we will have two raised buttons. For now, I'll set an empty onPressed function for them. Next, let's use the child property and add a text widget for both of them. For now, I'll set this text as red. Let's also set the color for these buttons using the color property. I'll set this as red as well. So if I save this code, we should see two red buttons in the app. Let's change one of them to blue. And since we have too much blank space, let's use the main axis alignment property of column and set it as evenly spaced. Looks good, but the buttons are too small. So let's add some padding to them. For this, I'll set the padding property of raised button using edgeinset.symmetric. I'll set vertical padding as 50 and horizontal padding as 100. Let's also increase the font size of text using style property and text style. I'll set it as 30 and save it. It looks much better now. Next, let's create a list of integers to store the number of times each button is pressed. I'll name this variable as counts. And since we know we only have two elements in this list, let's specify it in the list constructor. Now instead of displaying the string red and blue in these raised button, we can use string interpolation and display values stored in counts. For red button, I'll use the value at 0th index and for blue, I'll use the value at first index. If I save this code, you can see that strings changed to null. This is because counts was never initialized. So let's initialize that. For this, I'll override init state method. In here, after calling the init state of super, we can set counts 0 and counts 1 as 0. As init state gets called only once, this will ensure that we initialize counts to 0 once. If I now save this code, the strings will still not change. The reason for this is what I just said. Init state gets called only once. And for us, this call has already happened when we first launched this app. So to make it execute again, we will have to relaunch this app. So I'll use this restart button for that. And now you can see that the strings changed to 0. Now let's try to implement the onPressed function so that we can increase the count by 1 after every button press. We will have to use setState here, and inside this setState, I'll increase count 0 by 1 for red button and counts 1 for blue button. After saving this code, we can see that the counts on buttons now change after pressing them. But if I restart the app, these counts will reset to 0. So to make the counts persist, let's use shared preferences. First, I'll create a new object of shared preferences here. For this, you'll need to import the shared preferences.dart at the top. I'll name this object as pref. Now in the init state method, let's get an instance of shared preferences. Keep in mind that there will always be a single instance of shared preferences per app. If you see the documentation for get instance, you will find that it returns a future of shared preference. So to get the actual object, I'll use the .then method on getInstance. This .then method gets called when future completes, and the input variable value will contain the actual shared preference object. So the first thing I'll do here is store this value in pref so that we can use it later in the build method. And this will of course have to be inside a setState call. Now if you save this code, your Flutter app might close just like mine. I'm not sure why this happens, but it looks like hot reload does not handle major changes. So we'll probably have to restart the app. Okay, so I have now restarted the app, and now that we have reference to shared preferences in pref variable, we can use it to store the counts persistently. For this, I'll go to the onPressed method, and after incrementing the count by 1, I'll check if pref is null or not. If it is not null, we can call the setInt method on pref. You can see that we have multiple set methods for simple data types like setBool, setDouble, setString. For us, setInt is good enough. So setInt needs two inputs. First is a key and second is a value. Key is something that we will use later to get the stored value back from preferences. This needs to be a string. I'll use the string red button as key for red button and blue button string for blue button. You can provide any string here. Next, the second parameter to setInt will obviously be counts 0 for red button and counts 1 for blue button. So this much code should allow us to store the counts in shared preferences. But we also have to read the database when our app is opened next time. So for that, let's go to the initState method. Here, I'll call the getInt method on pref. GetInt needs only single input, which is the key that we use to store the value. So this will be red button. This will return the value stored for red button key. But there is a chance that we will get null here, because on the very first launch of our app, nothing will be available in shared preferences. So to detect this condition, I'll add an if check, and only if this check passes, we will set the value in counts 0. Similarly, I'll write the code for blue button too. Now just to see if this is working properly, I'll first save this code and put a breakpoint at first if check. Now if we restart our app, the breakpoint will get hit. Now let's see step by step if the code execution goes inside this if check. For this, I'll press F10 a few times, and as you can see, the execution went directly to the next if check. If I press F10 again, it will skip the second block of code too. This means that both red button and blue button key have no data in shared preferences. I'll press F5 to let the execution process normally. Now let's press these buttons a couple of times to increase the count. And now let's restart the app again. The breakpoint hits again, but this time if I press F10, we can see that it goes inside the if block because there was a value stored for red button. Same thing will happen for blue button too. Now if I hover over the counts variable, you can see that we have 10 and 3 values stored inside it. Now let's check if the data remains still available after we close and restart the app. For this, I'll stop the debugger and relaunch the app by pressing F5. And as you can see, we are still getting the correct values for red and blue button even after restarting the app. So that was it for this video. Using similar steps, you can store and retrieve data for other data types too. If you missed something or just want to copy this code, check out my GitHub repository containing all the code for this and previous videos, link for which is in the description. One thing I would like to bring up is make sure that you read the documentation for shared preferences. There is one line there which states that persistence to disk after returning is not guaranteed, and using this package to store critical data is not recommended. So use this package depending on your use case and criticality of data. That being said, thanks for watching this video. If you think I missed something or want me to cover any other Flutter package, let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, hit the like button and consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next one.